When I was grieving over the death of my father-in-law, my husband, Tom, made an unexpected declaration. I was shocked and lost for words at what he said. Now that I've got the inheritance, I don't need you, my ATM, anymore. Let's get a divorce. I couldn't grasp the meaning of his words immediately. Did he just refer to me as an ATM and say that my role was over? What do you mean? When I asked back, Tom, with a satisfied smile, explained proudly, I got an inheritance of $11 million from my dad. So, I don't need you anymore. Then he poured out his complaints about me. Do you know how uncomfortable I've been? Despite my expectations for the arranged marriage pushed by my dad, I was disappointed when a modest woman like you showed up. If that was the case, he could have simply declined the marriage. I never forced anything on him, nor did I actively pursue him. Being accused as if I were the perpetrator was unpleasant. Then why did you marry me? You could have just refused. The reason is obvious. For the money. Who else would marry someone like you? I couldn't stay silent any longer. Understood. Here, this is the divorce paper. I agreed to divorce him while keeping a certain fact to myself. It will be interesting to see how much he regrets this later. I am Amy Morgan, 42 years old, running an apparel company. I married Tom 2 years ago. He is 2 years younger than me. Our marriage began with an arranged meeting. He was the only son of Mr. Morgan, the president of the company I had long been doing business with. Initially, President Morgan saw him as the successor to the business. However, Tom had no such intention and was not particularly skilled in business. As a result, he was quickly removed from the list of successors and worked as a regular employee. What attracted me to Tom was his generosity. Since I was young, I have been attentive to details and was often described as serious. While I was often praised for my academic interests, I was also avoided for being too stiff. In past relationships, I was told, you could be more feminine. It's like dating a boss. Those words were shocking, but I always felt I might be too serious, so I had to accept it. I was often despised for lacking flexibility. I tend to get too absorbed in trying to do everything perfectly. To me, Tom seemed like someone from a different world. Wait, today was the regular day off? I was immediately surprised by Tom's attitude on our first date. We went out because Tom said he would take me to a restaurant he recommended, only to find it was closed on that day. Normally, I would be flustered by such an unexpected situation, but Tom was not. How about that diner then? He suggested another option right away. His flexible response was refreshing to someone like me, who lacks flexibility. Being with him, I might grow to respond more flexibly like him, I thought, deciding to marry Tom. I faced more opposition than expected, and some even advised me quietly that there was a more suitable partner out there. Even President Morgan, my father-in-law, didn't seem very approving. I'm sorry to hand over my son to you. Are you really okay with this? He asked. Back then, I thought, they just don't understand his good qualities. But recently, I've begun to think that maybe they were right. Shortly after we got married, Tom quit his job. He suddenly left his job without discussing it, and when his father and I asked why, he replied as if nothing was wrong. Huh? Amy earns enough, so why do I need to work? This left both his father and me speechless. I wonder why he leaves the responsibility of our finances entirely to me. Later, along with my father-in-law, I tried several times to persuade Tom, but his mindset remained unchanged. Anyway, even if I work, I won't make as much money as Amy does, said Tom, fully expecting to be supported by me, which made me consider divorce even though we had just gotten married. Perhaps if he were in his 20s, his irresponsibility might have seemed somewhat charming. However, the person showing childish behavior in front of me was a man nearing 40. Eventually, we compromised by agreeing that he would take charge of the household chores. Tom's parents had divorced a few years ago, and in the household where Tom lived before the divorce, his mother struggled with household duties. I didn't learn to do household chores because my mom couldn't do anything. He seemed to blame his mother for his inability to do housework. As he said, at first, Tom was utterly incapable of doing household chores. But after patiently teaching him and offering praise, he eventually managed to handle basic tasks. Despite his mediocre skills in housework, Tom was quite pleased with himself. By taking care of the home, I allow you to work outside, so I want some appreciation, he said. When Tom showed his confident profile, I felt a bit irritated, but I knew any inappropriate comments could ruin the progress. Right? I'm genuinely saved by your support, I replied with a wry smile. Though there were frustrating moments, I felt we were getting along fairly well overall. A year after our marriage, a change came into our lives. My father-in-law adopted a child. He's a 9-year-old boy named David, who seemed like any ordinary kid. My father-in-law is a man who doesn't engage in unnecessary actions. When we were alone, I asked him about the sudden adoption. While keeping it a secret, he revealed the reason. David was the son of a subordinate with whom he had a deep friendship. There had been interactions between the families, and for my father-in-law, David was as precious as a grandson. I just want him to be happy. Recently, David's parents died in an accident. They had married almost eloping when they were young, and David had no relatives to turn to. Hence, going to an institution seemed unavoidable. I don't know if David will feel happy living with me, but if he wishes, I'd like to live with him. That's why he decided to adopt David. That's a decision typical of you, sir. Tom and I don't have children, so we have relatively more freedom with our time. Please let us know if you need any help. My father-in-law showed a grateful smile to these words. Fortunately, he sometimes asked for help as I had suggested. We took care of David only when he couldn't return home from work or had unavoidable commitments. Initially, David was somewhat nervous, but he soon became attached to us. He appears to have a very friendly nature. Or perhaps he's trying his best to adapt to the new environment. Contemplating his feelings, I was filled with complex emotions. On the other hand, Tom seemed not to favor this situation much. He hadn't shown much enthusiasm about welcoming David. It's understandable to have mixed feelings about his father bringing an unknown child into the family. But after a thorough discussion with Tom, it turned out he was only concerned about one thing. What's the intention behind adopting? My inheritance might get reduced because of the division. I thought I would have it all to myself. Hearing this, I couldn't hide my surprise. Thomas' concern was not about David's feelings, but about the potential reduction in his share of the inheritance. I'll have a talk with Dad. I can't accept this. After making that statement, Tom went to have a direct conversation with his father. When Tom returned, he was in a cheerful mood, contrary to my anxiety. Seeing Tom smile, I cautiously asked, "How did it go?" "It's all good. It won't affect my share." "Really? How come?" I thought that an adopted child would have the same inheritance rights, so I was puzzled by his words. Tom explained with a hint of pride. "Dad said he'll have David renounce his inheritance rights." Well, of course. I'm his only son, after all. Considering how much his father loved David, it seemed unlikely that he would leave him with nothing. I felt something was off but couldn't quite put my finger on it. Though I was not convinced, Tom was relieved and happy on his own. Well, if my father-in-law said so, there must be a reason. Anyway, his father was still in his 60s. Worrying about inheritance should be a concern for the future. In fact, there was a higher chance that I would divorce Tom before his father's passing. With these thoughts, I remained relaxed. However, that time came sooner than expected. A year later, my father-in-law passed away in a traffic accident. I hadn't imagined losing him so soon. I had known his father longer than Tom had, and he was a person worthy of respect, both in business and personal life. When I heard the news, I couldn't stop my tears due to the profound sense of loss. With swollen eyes and a headache, I arranged the funeral. Tom was supposed to be the chief mourner, but he appeared to be in a daze, showing no signs of grief. He was probably still in shock from the sudden loss of his father. I had the responsibility to ensure his father's final send-off was done with care, so I endured my tears. During the funeral, it was particularly hard to see David crying, even though I was also deeply hurt. Meanwhile, Tom still showed no tears. At that point, I began to sense something was amiss. Tom seemed restless rather than mournful. Sometime after the funeral, the reason became clear. "Tom, why don't you seem sad about your father's death?" The conversation, which started out of concern for Thomas' lack of tears, led to an unexpected response. "Well, of course, I'm sad, but the joy overwhelms that sadness." Could it be overflowing joy? What? Amy, do you get it? Dad was a company president. It's clear he had assets. How much do you think he left behind? What? It was a merciless revelation. I had noticed his vacant expression, but he had been laughing about the inheritance even before the funeral, without any sorrow for his father's death. No way. How can you think like that? It's obvious. My parents were divorced, and my mother has no right to inherit. I'm the only blood-related child, and since David will renounce his inheritance, well, it all goes to me. How could I not be happy? Tom's face had a restrained smile. Looking at him, I felt an urge to lash out. He was genuinely delighted about his father's passing. Unbelievable. That's heartless. Say what you want. I felt a strong desire to leave the room. But before that, there was something I needed to tell Tom related to David's situation. After my father-in-law's death, it became temporarily my responsibility to take care of David. If the situation remained unchanged, he would eventually be sent to an institution. I had a strong desire to raise him with my own hands. About David, "Oh, you can take him. No problem at all," Tom surprisingly agreed smoothly, which shocked me. He added with a smile, "What you want to do is up to you. You have nothing to do with me anymore." What? At that moment, Tom showed me a piece of paper. It was a green divorce paper. "Why is this here?" His words shocked me, leaving me speechless. "I have an inheritance now, so I no longer need an ATM like you. Let's get a divorce," he said. I couldn't grasp the meaning of his words immediately. Did he just call me an ATM and say that my role was over? "What do you mean?" Tom, smiling contently, explained. "I inherited $11 million from my dad, so I don't need you anymore." Tom continued, "Now I can be free from work. I don't have to be considerate towards you or handle the bothersome chores myself. How joyful is that?" While saying this, Tom didn't hide his happiness. Witnessing his behavior, I felt deep disappointment. The inheritance was money obtained through my father-in-law's death. Yet, he was excited as if he had won the lottery. I had already sensed it, but now there was not a trace of sorrow or mourning for his father in Tom. He seemed genuinely immersed in his joy. However, money is a scary thing. It's not rare for someone who comes into a great fortune to change their personality. Perhaps Tom was just overly excited at the moment because of the money in front of him. "Calm down, Tom. Let's talk." Saying this, I placed my hand on his shoulder, but Tom brushed my hand off and yelled at me angrily. "Shut up, you uptight woman." Uptight? I married you because of my dad's introduction and because you were a female president. I've always felt suffocated around you. It's been hard. Thus, Tom continued to unilaterally express his grievances. "Do you know how uncomfortable I've been? Despite my expectations for the arranged marriage pushed by my dad, I was disappointed when a modest woman like you showed up. If that was the case, he could have simply declined the marriage. I never forced anything on him, nor did I actively pursue him. Being accused as if I were the perpetrator was unpleasant. Then why did you marry me? You could have just refused. The reason is obvious. For the money. Who else would marry someone like you?" Tom wore a sneering smile. "Essentially, he got married to me because of my wealth." Prefacing that it was all in the past, Tom revealed a shocking truth. "Actually, I had a significant amount of debt." "What?" "My dad said if I married you and changed my ways, you would take care of that debt. With such an offer, how could I refuse marriage?" So, Tom never loved me. He married me solely for financial reasons. Well, it wasn't fun, but thanks to you, my debt is cleared. I'm grateful. Seeing Tom laugh loudly and crudely, I made up my mind. I will no longer have any association with him. I also held back the final advice I wanted to give him. It was swallowed in my decision to move on. And so I quietly began to fill out the divorce papers. My pen moved smoothly, without hesitation. Tom seemed a bit surprised by my decisiveness to go through with the divorce. Are you really going through with the divorce? Yes, this is the completed divorce paper. After completing the form, I felt a certain sense of fulfillment. Now we are strangers to each other, right? Now it doesn't matter what happens. Whether you're with that kid or I'm with a new girlfriend, it's all free. Seeing Tom happy, I at least understood that he hadn't been unfaithful during our marriage. I had no suspicions, but that was one point in his favor. If you're this happy, maybe we should have gotten divorced earlier. I had no choice. I needed the money. I watched as Tom put the divorce papers in his bag and hurried out of the house. Living in this house where I had shared life with Tom and continuing there with David didn't feel right. I decided it was best to start anew. It felt like the perfect timing to move then, so I decided to sell the house. I preferred to live closer to my parents' home. It would be a support system for both David and me. David would have to change schools, but he consented, saying, "It's no problem." Though there was a bit of sadness, this allowed me to freely proceed with looking for a new place. After carefully considering many options, I made a decision. The most crucial factors were easy access to my parents' home and a good location. The price was high, but considering David, I was confident it was the right choice. David came along to view the property and was thrilled, exclaiming, "This is luxurious." The rooms were spacious, and the interior had a thoughtful design. There was ample storage space, and to my surprise, there was also a pool. I didn't need a pool myself, but David was very excited about it. Wow, amazing. If David is happy, that's enough for me. And so, we moved to our new home. At first, we both took time to get used to it, but gradually the new house became our place of solace. Then one day, I received a message from Tom. He seemed very troubled and wanted to meet urgently to apologize. I had a rough idea why he was making such a proposal suddenly, though I had the option to ignore him. I decided to meet him since he insisted. I left David with my mother and headed to the diner I had chosen. Tom appeared to have arrived before me. Sitting in a corner of the diner, he looked pale as if he was about to cry. "Amy," as he stood up upon seeing me, I looked back at him coldly. "What do you want? We're strangers now." "Please don't say that. Actually, Dad had debts." "Damn, I never thought Dad would." "What about it? You received an inheritance of $11 million, right? Just pay it off with that." "Well, the thing is, the debt is more than that." It turned out the debt exceeded the $11 million inheritance. As a result, Tom, who inherited both the assets and debts, was now burdened with the debt. I didn't sign up to inherit debt. Tom looked downcast. "Please, Amy, you must have some decent money, right? We were once married, so can't you help me?" Tom pleaded with a servile smile. Did this man not remember what he said before? After looking down on me and calling me an ADM? Why would he ask for help from me then? It's quite something that he's even reached out to me. Over the phone, he said he wanted to apologize in person, but he hasn't apologized yet. You really despised our marriage, didn't you? You said you regretted it, so why are you asking for help now? Well, at that time, I never thought things would turn out like this. His nonchalance is astounding. He thought he no longer needed my money, but when he needed it again, he crawled back to me. Unfortunately, I can't meet your expectations. I don't have any money. What? No, I know your business is doing well. You're lying. He was in a difficult situation because of his own actions, and he shouldn't even complain to someone unrelated like me. I'm not lying. I just don't have the spare funds to lend to you. Even an ADM won't give out money if there's no prospect of getting it back, right? Tom seemed to remember what he had previously said to me and looked a bit guilty. Still, he didn't apologize, too full of pride. Why are you so cold? Don't you care about me at all? Remember what you said at the divorce? Once we divorce, we're strangers. We have nothing to do with each other, that's what you said. I couldn't understand why he acted like he was the victim. His brazenness was astonishing, as if he has a special talent for forgetting inconvenient truths. I then played back his words from that time. Yeah, I might have said something like that, but I didn't mean it, you know? I never imagined things would turn out like this. Tom leaned on the table, looking dejected. I hoped there was something left, but Dad's lawyer said I am not the beneficiary of his life insurance. I see. Haha. My laughter made Tom look at me in surprise. Don't tell me, Amy. Did Dad leave something to you? No, not to me. Why did you laugh, then? I just felt a bit sorry for you. Life insurance is one way to avoid inheriting debt. That's why my father-in-law had David renounce his inheritance and used life insurance to leave something for him. In fact, it turned out David was the beneficiary of the life insurance. Is that all you wanted to talk about? If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. There's nothing I can do for you. Wait, can we start over? I was just confused because of my dad's issues at that time, but you were always focused on money, weren't you? I see right through you. Tom tried to deny it, but I was no longer going to be deceived. After all, I owe him nothing anymore. Sorry, someone important is waiting for me at home. With that, I left the diner. I heard Tom crying out behind me, but to me, it was just irrelevant noise. I needed to hurry home. David might be waiting for me, hungry, or maybe he's already eaten. I hurried towards the station. I don't know much about Tom's current situation, but I heard he's juggling multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debt. He couldn't get hired as a full-time employee anywhere due to lack of qualifications and motivation. Once, while on my way to a client, I saw Tom working at a store. He looked significantly older and exhausted, a stark transformation caused by his previous lifestyle of relying on others' finances. I feel no sympathy for him. On the other hand, David and I are living peaceful days. We have arguments and disputes sometimes, but I take it as a sign that David is opening up to me. I plan to support him until he becomes independent. That's the last wish of my father-in-law and my current purpose in life. Our house is so gloomy because someone sleeps all day. It's really troublesome because she can't even take care of herself, let alone do the housework. I wonder how long she plans to just lie there. Whenever they see me, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law always complain. Seriously, having a daughter-in-law who does nothing is the same as not having one at all. There's no point in having such a wife, my father-in-law added, expressing his dissatisfaction. I, Hillary Brown, am 32 years old. It's been 5 years since I got married. My father passed away due to an illness when I was in high school, and my mother passed away right after I got married. Ever since I was young, I loved doloing and have been aspiring to become a picture book author. After graduating from high school, I went to a design school and then worked as an illustrator at a small design firm. My husband works at an advertising agency, and our meeting was initiated when he came to my company to request character design. After dating for 2 years, we got married and started living with his parents and sister. Becoming a freelancer upon marriage, I could work from home. I tried my best to be an excellent wife by dedicating myself to house chores. My mother-in-law didn't care much for housework and left it all to me, which made it relatively easy for me. My sister-in-law had little interest in house chores and was often busy with dining out or parties with friends and colleagues, so we seldom had meals together, but there were no major issues. However, 3 years ago, I fell down the stairs at a station and suffered severe injuries, which changed my life significantly. I now have severe lower limb paralysis due to spinal cord injury. Although it was a huge shock at first, I have gradually adapted to this situation over the years. Initially, my in-laws were very concerned, but it seems they did not imagine I would remain unable to walk, and their attitudes changed over time. During this time, my sister-in-law got married and moved out. I'm so glad I don't have to look at you anymore, Hillary, she joked. Being nearly bedridden, the cold demeanor I got from my in-laws was apparent. Indeed, having a bedridden family member brought various troubles, so I couldn't retort to my in-laws' sarcasm. In the old family home, where there was not enough space for a wheelchair, I had no choice but to mostly stay in bed all day since I couldn't move without one. Fortunately, I was working from home even before the accident, so I was able to continue my job. I was grateful that I was able to work since I could move my upper body. I am currently supported by a helper and a maid who come to assist with house chores. If I were living alone, the helper would support me with my daily life, but the scope is limited because I live with my family. The helper mainly provides physical support. My husband is too busy to take care of my daily needs, but my in-laws are very healthy. My mother-in-law is healthy, and my father-in-law, who retired last year at 65, is always at home. Since there are healthy family members at home who do not work, the support from the home helper for cleaning, laundry, and shopping is limited. In the first 2 years, my in-laws occasionally helped, but gradually they did it less often. I understand that my mother-in-law, who dislikes house chores, finds it bothersome to do my share as well. My husband initially was encouraging, but now he hardly speaks to me and offers no support. He only says, "I have work, and caregiving is not something men do." Even if my in-laws don't help, the helper must follow the rules and can't provide life support. However, seeing my in-laws' reaction, the helper got concerned and introduced a maid. Hiring a maid is such a waste. Why would you say that? But I have personal needs, and without laundry service, I'll run out of clothes to wear. Do you intend to use me? Even though you're just a daughter-in-law? I don't intend to, but given the situation, I have no choice but to ask. When I conveyed this, my in-laws looked at me with annoyance. Really? You are a nuisance. We can't afford this in our house. I'll manage that myself. I was once again grateful that I could continue working. And so the maid came. The maid, Sarah, was a 52-year-old woman who lost her husband early and had no children. She somehow reminded me of my deceased mother. She was a warm person who cared with all her heart, and I am truly grateful. Now, the only people I could talk to were not my family, but Sarah and the helper. When Sarah visited, my in-laws immediately tried to ask her to do their errands as well. Can you also take care of our laundry and cleaning? I can't do that. What? Aren't you a maid? What are you here for? If you want that service, it will incur additional charges. Will you pay for it? If so, I can accommodate. Why are you so arrogant? Such a troublesome maid. Despite such exchanges, I felt somewhat relieved that Sarah clearly refused. This situation continued for about a year when my sister-in-law returned after getting a divorce. She insisted that her husband's infidelity was the reason. He's dumb, got seduced by another woman. Such a troublesome man, she said, though her ex-husband, who worked at a renowned company, seemed very sincere and not the type to cheat. I found it odd but kept quiet to avoid causing any trouble. It's so helpful to have a maid here. Of course, you'll take care of me too, right? My sister-in-law said the same as my in-laws, but Sarah firmly refused. Sarah did not have a favorable view of my in-laws, who were not kind to me. I refuse. Then what are you here for? I am here to assist Hillary with her daily tasks. What? Well, just as useless as the daughter-in-law. Hillary must be skimping, right? Well, it's not like she earns more than pennies. She's a failure who can't even take care of herself, and that's why I have no choice but to rely on the maid. You and your mother can take care of yourselves, right? When I counted like this, they fell silent, but the sarcasm from my in-laws got worse when my sister-in-law returned. A bedridden wife is just a nuisance. Now that Megan is back, the house feels too small with you here. Megan is all we need. It must be nice to have it easy, just lolling in bed all day. Even while I was working, Megan made a point to come to my room just to be sarcastic. Fed up with the daily sarcasm, I talked to my husband. Hey, can you ask your mother and Megan to be a little bit more mindful with their words? I get hurt too, but it's the truth, isn't it? What do you mean by truth? You can't do housework and you spend all day in bed. I'm not just spending time in bed. I'm actually working. But you're working from bed, right? Seems like an easy job. I'm tired from commuting. That might be true, but I'm trying to be useful and I'm making an effort too. It's understandable that mom and others are frustrated. You're not fulfilling your role as a wife. Do you really mean that? Just try not to get so worked up. It's tiring to sweat the small stuff. That was all he said, showing no empathy. I feel the inconvenience in my body and it's painful not being understood at all. If I were healthy, if I could live a normal life, how different would each day be? I just wanted my husband to understand the harshness and sadness of my current situation. I can't stop crying when I think that my feelings might be just me being selfish. Despite my physical limitations since the accident, I've tried to keep moving forward, telling myself there are others in tougher situations. At times like this, I feel lonely without having a trustworthy family by my side. But at the same time, I'm glad that my parents don't have to see my current state. However, it seems there was no one in this house to support me anymore, which increased my sense of isolation. I didn't have a place to return to, and just when I was contemplating a new life with my husband, he surprised me with his words. I've been thinking over what my mom and others said. I briefly felt happy, thinking he tried to understand my situation. But his next words plunged me into deep despair. I ended up agreeing with them. What do you mean? I think it's better to find a younger, healthier wife. What? I still want kids, but with you. It'll be difficult now. It felt like a blow to the head. I couldn't believe my own husband would say this. I realized I couldn't expect anything more from him. He kept talking, but I couldn't hear a thing. However, I understood that my husband wanted a divorce. You're truly useless, just like a big piece of trash. You might be paying for the maid, but your salary isn't much, so there's hardly anything left after paying her. You're just baggage, a parasite in our house. That's true. The helper costs money too. A money-eating parasite should just leave. Disdained by my husband and his family, there was no reason for me to stay. Even without a home to return to, I decided it would be fine as long as I found a new place to live. Maybe I'll move out. With Sarah's help, I began looking for a new place. Sarah was supportive, and it was convenient to handle the procedures online. Once everything was prepared, I handed the completed divorce papers to my husband. You've finally decided, but don't resent me. Blame your condition. I understand, but are you really okay with this? With me leaving? Of course. I'll find someone more suitable. Everyone says I can find a better wife. Will your life be okay? Don't worry. There's Dad's retirement money, and Megan got a good settlement from the divorce. We won't have financial issues for a while, so I don't need to rely on you anymore. Alright, do as you wish. My husband seemed oblivious to reality, but I didn't speak further and left my in-laws' house. There was a silver lining. Living alone meant the helper could now support me with daily living activities. She helped with cleaning, laundry, and shopping, which was a great relief. Sarah continued to support me as well. She used to be a career woman at a large corporation, skilled in computer use. She left her job after getting married, tired of the bustling corporate life. It's been 20 years now. Sarah laughed as she spoke, but her past experiences seemed to empower her to stand up to my in-laws. Now, she's more of a coordinator for my work than a maid, and her support is indispensable. She's happy to help, which is a great relief. Moreover, my new apartment was barrier-free, suitable for wheelchair users, allowing me to move independently. The kitchen was spacious, enabling me to cook on my own. As I was getting used to the new days, persistent calls from my mother-in-law began. However, I decided not to talk to her anymore and ignored all her calls. With Sarah's help, I was able to focus on my work without worrying about my in-laws' criticism, which significantly advanced my work progress. My work increased so much that I didn't have time to deal with my mother-in-law. A year later, the contacts from my mother-in-law became less frequent, but they still occurred. As my life had stabilized, I decided to answer the phone when she called. Hello. You finally picked up the phone. Why have you been ignoring me? I was worried because you never answered. I thought something might have happened. I was addressed in a tone softer than I had ever heard before. During our time living together, she never showed concern for me. I felt she was probably overwhelmed by reality and at a loss. I wondered about the kind of life she imagined I had been leading this past year. I'm sorry if I caused you any concern. I am very well and living my days peacefully. So please don't worry. That's a relief. But there's something I want to ask. What is it? Won't you consider living with us again, like before? Me? I was once considered just a nuisance, a parasite. Living with me again, there wouldn't be any benefit for you. I've had a change of heart. I can't abandon someone with physical limitations like you. We'll take care of you from now on so you don't have to worry. No, thank you. Living alone, the helper provides daily support. I can ask for help with cleaning, laundry, shopping, and Sarah assists me with my work, so I have no worries. I wanted to ask about your work. Is it true that you were earning more than Ted? Yes, it's true. But it seems Ted had forgotten that by the time we divorced. Hillary, Ted told me you were making $15,000 a month. My salary supported the household expenses at my in-laws. Initially, my in-laws helped due to my physical limitations, and this coincided with a decrease in my husband's income due to his company's poor performance. Fortunately, my income increased. That's why I brought it up with my husband. At first, he said, "I'm sorry," and asked me to keep the decrease in his income a secret to not worry his parents. However, after nearly 3 years, it seemed he had forgotten that I was the one making the payments. When we divorced, I deliberately didn't mention his income. Moreover, I knew that my sister-in-law's divorce wasn't due to her husband's infidelity but her own, which the brother-in-law had informed me about. I learned that she had taken money without permission and lied about receiving compensation. Her husband said he would ensure she returned the money and would claim compensation. I decided to divorce before my in-laws could learn about this fact. When I revealed the truth to my mother-in-law, she was speechless for a while. Ted became obsessed with a woman he met at a nightclub and ended up in debt. That was the reason for the divorce, I suppose. Perhaps you were hoping for that woman's income? That's not true. They weren't in a relationship. He was just one of her customers. That might be the case. Did you know about this? Yes, I knew everything. Why didn't you tell me? Did you also know that Ted's company was in trouble? Of course, I knew that too. To know all that and say nothing. How cruel. According to my former mother-in-law, my sister-in-law eloped with her affair partner but was eventually abandoned and returned with a significant debt. My ex-husband's company went bankrupt 6 months ago, and though he's job hunting, he claims nothing suits him and is currently unemployed. I heard he's lost confidence and has shut himself away. My husband's retirement fund also got exhausted because the children moved back in. On top of that, there's still debt remaining. Is that so? I think everything will work out if you come back. I can't understand that at all. I couldn't grasp what she meant by working out and why she would say such a thing after driving me away. I never expected things to change so much in just a year. It was quite fast, wasn't it? My ex-husband probably never imagined his company would actually go bankrupt. Given his lack of attention to anything, it was predictable. My mother-in-law pleaded in tears. If I had known, I wouldn't have chosen to let go of you, but it was too late now. All she talked about was financial worries. They only thought about their own lives. My sister-in-law didn't seem motivated to find a job and kept gaining weight as she just ate and slept. We had to sell the house to pay off the children's debts. The family home was old and not worth much, and after deducting demolition costs, it didn't amount to much. Now they're living cramped in a small apartment, in a dire situation. My former in-laws are exhausted, working part-time jobs from morning till evening, or so I heard her crying over the phone. Because you didn't pick up the phone, we ended up in this situation. If we had been able to contact you before selling the house, what do you think would have happened? If you had known, you would have helped, right? You lived in that house too, so you must have had some attachment to it. That's not true, though. What? The thought of how self-centered their thinking was nothing but astonishing. I'm glad I ignored the calls. Even if I had answered, I wouldn't have agreed to such a discussion. So, Ted and Megan are all depending on you, Debbie, and your husband now. Hillary, please come back. We have no one to rely on but you now. I'm sorry, but I am a stranger now and can't help you. Don't say that. We know how terrible we were in the past. We apologize. Let's build a barrier-free house with your money and live together. I couldn't understand how she could make such a proposal. It made my head hurt. I had to make things clear and end this conversation. I refuse. I answered your call today because I had something to tell you. What is it? I intend to claim damages from you. Why should we pay you damages? Ted didn't have an affair with the lady from the nightclub. He was just a customer. Not for the affair, but for the mental anguish caused by the verbal abuse from you. What? When I mentioned that I had recorded all their abusive behavior as evidence, my former mother-in-law was clearly shaken and hurriedly ended the call. Maybe she was afraid of being charged with something. Maybe because she knew they were guilty. Later, through a lawyer, I filed a claim for damages. They conveyed their current situation and begged for the claim to be waived, but I had no intention of agreeing. Having secured a new job illustrating children's books, I'm moving closer to my dream of being a picture book author. After many trials, I plan to continue moving forward independently and positively without being lenient on myself. I'm a little shocked that you would criticize my mother-in-law. If you're not working, why don't you get out of here? My sister-in-law and mother-in-law, who did not know that I was taking over my mother-in-law's debt, threw these words at me without the slightest sense of gratitude. Yes, I understand. But it's up to you guys from now on. The day I packed my bags, they realized a fact I had been hiding and put their heads together. My name is Emma. I am 32 years old, a busy career woman working in an office in the city. When I was a student, I spent most of my time in the corner of the library absorbed in my books. After I got a job, I was buried under a mountain of work and forgot to take time for myself. One of my friends, who sincerely cared about me, said, "Emma, why don't you try to cherish your love life a little?" And she organized a group blind date for me. Then, a man whose eyes met mine was John, who worked in a building in the city center. He is a fresh salaryman working in a building in the city center. And to my surprise, he seemed to be a little interested in me. I was nervous about the feeling of dating after a long time, but supported by his kind words, we gradually opened our hearts to each other. Then he made a gentle confession to me, and our love accelerated. Only 1 year later, we decided to get married. It was like a dream come true that I, who had been so absorbed in my work, could stand at such a wonderful turning point in my life. My friend who organized the group blind date was also surprised at our sudden development. She said, "Oh, really? You're getting married?" I said, "Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? But it's great. I'm so glad I organized that group blind date. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the wedding. I'm looking forward to it." Thus, I was to open the door to a new life. First, we reported to each other's families. Seeing me so happy, my parents welcomed him warmly. "Emma, you haven't told me about your boyfriend for a long time, so I was a little worried that maybe you wouldn't get married. John, please take care of her from now on." When I heard these words, I felt as if I realized for the first time what my parents really thought of me. I realized that parents think a lot of things without saying them. My family had been basically free to do whatever I wanted, so there was no pressure to get married. But it seems that in my parents' mind, there was a wish to see their daughter happily married someday. Knowing such a parent's wish made my heart warm a little. And when I visited John's house for the first time, I met his family with nervous excitement. But his mother and father were both very warm and made me feel very safe. Next, we had dinner with the whole family. While I was looking forward to it, I was also a little nervous, especially because I had heard that John's sister, Melissa, was there. She was only 25 years old, and her choice of words was a little rough at times, which made me a little confused. She asked me, "Emma, you're already at that age. Weren't you getting married too late?" I was a little shocked to hear her say things like, "I would have decided sooner if I were you." But John followed up and we had a nice dinner afterwards. We then planned our wedding and had a happy wedding at a place we loved. We had a lot of friends and family there, and the day was really great. Our honeymoon was so much fun, and when we returned home, we started our new life together. Life together was fresh, and every day was so much fun. We went out on dates and watched movies at home. I felt that newlyweds are really happy. It has been about 2 years since we got married. One day, our peaceful everyday life changed drastically. We received the news that my father-in-law had passed away. Of course, I knew he had health problems, but I had not expected him to pass away so soon. My husband and I were deeply saddened by this sudden news. My mother-in-law's grief was especially deep, and I could feel her emotions as I looked at her. But our surprise was compounded by what we subsequently found out. In fact, my mother-in-law was in deep debt. It was apparently due to the fact that she had been cheated by some unscrupulous person and lost a large sum of money. When we learned of this fact, we could only gape. My husband, with his usual gentle nature, said he wanted to help her somehow. So, we decided to use our shared savings to reduce my mother-in-law's debt as much as possible. I thought it would be too hard for her to bear that heavy debt alone after my father-in-law's death. However, my mother-in-law's reaction was a little unexpected. She said something like, "If I am in trouble again, can I ask John for help?" My husband was a little surprised and replied, "That's a little." My mother-in-law said something positive, "But I'll find a way to get more money somehow." But my husband was worried. "I hope that's not gambling." We kept a watchful eye on my mother-in-law and were on the lookout for any trouble she might get herself into again. In the midst of all this, my husband was suddenly injured and had to be hospitalized. That event also became a big ordeal for my husband and me. Since every day was spent flitting back and forth from the hospital to take care of my husband, I never noticed any changes in my mother-in-law's daily routine. Then one day, after my husband was discharged from the hospital, I decided to pay a little visit to his parents' home. During our first reunion in a long time, I could sense that something had changed in the atmosphere. "Mom, long time no see." My husband greeted her with a smile, and my mother-in-law said, "John, you are getting better. Can you run again?" She smiled at him and said. While smiling at this exchange, my husband began to flip through my mother-in-law's bank book. To his surprise, the money in his mother-in-law's bank book, which we had accumulated after her previous debts had been repaid, was almost completely gone. "What's wrong with this bank book, Mother?" my husband exclaimed in surprise, to which his mother-in-law replied with a slightly embarrassed smile, "You know, I had tea with friends and found a nice little bag. And then I found myself in this mess." She laughed bitterly. With that one word, my husband and I froze in complete surprise. It was as if we had saved money for our mother-in-law's future, and she had spent it happily without a care in the world. My husband couldn't help but say, "Mom, you shouldn't spend it like this. Do you know how much we put our hearts into giving you money for your future?" He said something like that. Seeing my mother-in-law's remorse, we became truly concerned about her future. We suggested that she move in with us to support her life closer to us. When we broached the subject, my mother-in-law's eyes lit up with joy, and she gave up her house and moved into our apartment. Our new shared life together began, and my mother-in-law seemed to enjoy every day of it. The three of us laughed and talked around the table at every meal, and my mother-in-law volunteered to help with the housework, which made life surprisingly easy for both of us. Her upbeat mood was infectious, and our days became brighter and warmer. I said, "Mom, what would you like for lunch today?" I think I'll have udon." "That sounds good." Since I was working remotely, I was in a position to monitor how my mother-in-law spent her money. Since my husband and I, provided her living expenses and my husband managed my mother-in-law's account, there was supposed to be no worry about her spending excessive money. However, we kept a close eye on her, worried that she might spend the money in some way. These days continued, and in no time at all, 6 months passed. One afternoon, while we were relaxing in the living room, the intercom rang. We wondered who it was, and when I answered, I found my sister-in-law, Melissa, standing there. I said, "Melissa, it's been a while. Is my mother there?" I was a little surprised to hear her ask such a question without even saying hello, but I showed her into the living room. "Mom, it's been a while." "Oh, Melissa, what brings you here?" "I just wanted to see your face once in a while." "Thanks, I'm glad you're here. How are you?" "Of course. I'm fine. John is with me." "So, do you want to go to lunch with me?" "Sure, let's go." Melissa must have taken my mother-in-law to a restaurant or something. We decided to wait at home. When they came home in the evening, we looked at them and their faces changed. Then Melissa said, "Emma, you are tormenting my mother, aren't you?" I was surprised and could not understand what she was saying. My mother-in-law also looked at me sternly. My husband said, "What are you talking about? There is no way Emma would do such a thing." He immediately took my side, but Melissa would not budge. "John is being deceived too. Mom says she can't go outside and she hears Emma is saying things inside the house." We could only be amazed. Indeed, there were times when my mother-in-law would ask to go shopping and we would refuse because she would waste money. Also, my mom said you were taking her money. I had to admit that this statement surprised me. Did my mother-in-law think so, or did Melissa blow it that way? In any case, it seemed that Melissa and my mother-in-law had joined together in accusing me. "Now, what do you want from me?" I was about to feel like I was bewitched by a fox. What on earth did they want to tell me? I wondered if they just wanted to say something to me. At that moment, my sister-in-law said something I never thought she would say. She said, "I want you to leave our house. I feel like my mother can't really live happily with you. Because I can't believe you treat my mother-in-law so coldly." Her face clouded over. My mother-in-law looked as if she wanted to say something and turned to me. "If you were gone, I would be able to relax and enjoy my time with John and Melissa." I was surprised by her words, but I could not say anything. In fact, they did not know that I had previously paid off her debts for my mother-in-law by cutting into my savings. Looking back, I probably should have made it clear to them at the time that I had not taken it out as our marital savings, but as my own. When I looked at my husband's face, he looked very angry. His hands were clenched and his body was shaking a little. Melissa said, "My mother and I are going to live here together from now on. So, I want you to leave," my sister-in-law said again. Taking a deep breath for a moment, I answered my sister-in-law, "I understand, but I won't get involved in what happens next." After that exchange, my husband and I decided to leave the house. And on the day we moved out, they were surprised to discover one truth. "Looks like you've made arrangements to move out right away after all." "Yes, I have something to tell Melissa." "Yes, what is it?" My husband chuckled and said, "Actually, I'm getting older and I was thinking that I should put the house in Melissa's name." My sister-in-law's eyes sparkled and she said, "Really? It's going to be my house?" she said excitedly. My husband quietly produced the documents for the change of name and said, "As long as you sign here, that's all right." My sister-in-law happily said, "I can't believe I have my own apartment," and signed it. My husband and I looked at each other stealthily and exchanged smiles at the success of our plan. "Well, it's time to start getting ready to leave." "What, John? Are you really leaving?" "Yes, I've decided to leave too." Oh, even John is leaving? Do you really have to leave with Emma? If I'm not with Emma, I don't feel comfortable either. It's normal for married couples to be together. I knew you would say that, but then what are we going to do about future house expenses and stuff? That's something you'll have to devise and pay for on your own. Wait a minute. I quit my job because I believed you would support me, okay? My husband and I could not hide our surprise at my sister-in-law's sudden statement. If you keep this up, you're going to get me and our mother into a lot of trouble. That's fine if you can devise a way to live on your own. You have our mother's pension, and if you save a little, you can manage. Yes, and if you add my pension to that, we can manage. Since you're going to live here, we need to be creative about it. My sister-in-law looked a little satisfied with my mother-in-law's kind words. Indeed. It's my new home. If I save a little money, I should be able to get by. However, my husband and I laughed inwardly at my sister-in-law saying such a thing, not knowing that the property was a rental. About that time, the movers arrived. We welcomed them and began to move more and more stuff out. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law rolled their eyes at the sight. What are you doing? Getting ready to move out. Are you taking everything? Of course. We bought all this stuff. Do I have to buy everything new? That's right. I wish you had known that and acted accordingly. Well, we better get going. My husband smiled and said, and we left the house. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law froze in amazement for a while. After a while, my sister-in-law called my husband's cell phone. She said, "Hey, John, what's with the rent bill all of a sudden?" I was a little mistaken. Could it be that I am not the owner of this house? Who told you about that? Well, I'm actually renting this house. The document you signed at that time, which was the rental agreement. So, it's only natural that you should be charged for the rent. Seriously, I didn't know that at all. It's where you live, so you have to pay the rent. But my salary is not that much compared to you. You may laugh, but Emma actually makes more money than I do. Oh, no. It's true. She is working hard at a remote company that pays pretty well. That's why we were able to live so comfortably in that apartment. My sister-in-law was so surprised that she was speechless for a while. Next, I heard my mother-in-law's worried voice. "We're so sorry," she said. "I'm really sorry. Could you please reconsider and come back?" My husband responded gently but firmly. "Thank you, Mother. But it's hard for me to go back because of your attitude toward Emma. She is the most important to me. Please take care of the rest." "You will take care of it." After that exchange, I heard various rumors. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law had apparently been forced to look for an apartment after getting tripped up on rent payments. They are now trying to make do in a small apartment that is barely big enough for the two of them to live in, but it is said that they are having financial problems and occasional fights. They are also concerned about the neighbors' eyes on them. John and I have started a new life in our new house. Every day is fun and full of happiness.